We'll be talking about the effects of Trump's tariffs. With this presentation, I'll be talking about these concepts: the employment and then structural unemployment, monetary policy, trade policy and its protection, inflation pressures, and the impacts on manufacturing. First concept would be the employment and structural change. Trump's claim versus reality. President Trump has argued that higher tariffs will help receive the US manufacturing and bring back those lost manufacturing jobs, particularly in the sectors like the auto industry. However, globalization is not the main reason for this decline in factory jobs. Instead, the true reason behind the long term decline in manufacturing is due to the unemployment or technological process in our automation. The machines, especially with the software increasing replacing human labor. The structural unemployment. This is the type of unemployment that arises when worker skills do not match the needs of the economy. Job losses in manufacturing are largely due to a shift in the structure of the economy, such as automation and changes in global supply chains. Not temporary downturns like clinical unemployment. These changes are often permanent or long term, meaning job loss to automation are unlikely to return even with the policy intervention like tariffs. Some of the long-term effects that was applied, the IMF notes that protected industries may become less efficient and less innovative, and they are no longer facing as much competition. This can limit productivity and job creation in the long run. Efforts to protect jobs through trade barriers can lead slower economic growth and higher inflation, which both can further destabilize conditions. Next concept we'll be talking about is monetary policies. First, with the Federal Reserve's dilemma. The Fed is facing uncertainty about adjusting interest rates due to the economic effects of the rising tariffs. The IMF now expects US inflation to be 1 percentage point higher than previously forecasted, largely because of this tariff can increase the cost of import goods. This is a classic cost up push inflation scenario. The tension between the economic policies and its politics. This caution has sparked criticism from President Trump, who has pushed for lower interest rates to stimulate the economy. This situation reveals a tension between monetary policy, which is controlled by the Federal Reserve, and fiscal and trade policy, led by the administration. When political leaders try to pressure central banks, it's undermining investor and public confidence in the system. The importance of the central bank independence. The IMF strongly emphasized that central bank independence is an essential, especially for maintaining a credible and effective monetary policy framework. The independent central banks are most likely to make long-term, stability-focused decisions without political interference, especially during periods of the economic uncertainty. Step is the impact in manufacturing, specifically on car manufacturing and manufacturing. The US imposed a 25% on auto imports. The criticism that was received was that Europe wasn't purchasing enough American-made cars. Luxury brands like BMW and Mercedes-Benz are relocating their production to lower-cost regions. Europe's top car making is a symbol of Germany's post-war industrial strength is now facing major challenges. BMW's now goal is to hit at the bottom line of $1 billion this year due to trade measures. Next up is a Eurozone manufacturing. European drug makers showed resilience around in April, with the sector's purchasing managers index (PMI) ticking up. Although it remained in a contraction territory, it indicates that while activity continued to decline, the rate of decline was easing. In February, European exports to the US surged by 22%. Just before the announcements of new tariffs, leading to a short-term boost in output driven by pre-tariff demand. As a result, Eurozone manufacturers responded swiftly by either ramping up production to meet export surge or exploring relocation drivers to long-term risk. Its related strength was largely driven by the solid performances in key export sectors, such as pharmaceuticals and automobiles. Drug makers, in particular, benefited from the strike in US demand as buyers rushed to place orders ahead of the tariffs on pharmaceuticals. Companies like Roche even announced plans to expand their US operations in response in the shifting trade environment. Next up is trade policies and protectionism. Protectionism basically is a trade policy strategy that country shows its one industries by making foreign goods more expensive. Tariffs are basically taxes placed on imported goods. Trump's tariffs as protectionism includes 10% tariffs on foreign imports, up to 50% reciprocal tariff on Pacific countries, 145% tariffs on Chinese imports, and 25% tariffs on steel, aluminite, and cars. These tariffs also cause a strain in international relations. Allies like Europe, Canada, and Mexico were completely angered because by this tariff. China responded with both tariffs and strategic export bans. This fosters a global political tension, weakening cooperation on border issues like security, climate, and diplomacy. This also caused economic costs to the US. Consumers have to pay more due to the higher prices on imported goods like clothes and electronics. This hurts households, and in 2025, it cost the average US home to be $1,243. This is we also have an economic slowdown. The US GDP shrinks in early 2025 and inflation rose due to higher costs. Exporters suffers because of this. Retaliatory tariffs like China's 125% on US good reduce demand for American made products. Trade diversion and economic efficiency. One side effect of tariffs is trade diversion. Instead of importing the cheapest goods, like from China, buyers shift to more expensive goods from other countries to avoid the tariffs. This can lead to reduced global economic efficiency. The world produces the same goods but at a higher cost. An example of this is that a US company might switch from buying $100 worth of Chinese components to 120 components from Vietnam, not because they're better, but they try to dodge the 145% tariff. This is an inefficient recalibration of trade, raises prices and wastes resources. Trump's tariffs influence US trade policy by altering trade flows. Importers saw alternatives from untariffed countries or brought production back into the US. Fearing retaliation, other nations, especially China and Europe, imposed their own tariffs on US goods. Creating uncertainty, businesses face unstable supply chains, variable costs, and unclear rules, discouraging investment. Politically important sectors like steel and autos. For example, U.S. steel makers saw a short-term benefit due to reduced foreign competition. It has less competition from cheaper imports. The U.S. producers gain market share. Domestic factories may increase output, hire more workers, and invest in expanding production. The limitations and trade-offs. While tariffs can protect domestic industries in the short term, they can also raise costs for the U.S. manufacturers who rely on imported materials. For exporters, when other countries retaliate, can lead to job losses in industries that depend on global trade or face higher input. And these are my references for this entire project.